The wicker basket, full of smooth white eggs, sat in the center of the kitchen table. Saturday morning light streamed through the window, touching the surface of each egg and creating a soft glow. The house was silent, in the kind of silence that waits for something to begin. The eggs were there, perfect in their simplicity, yet incomplete. They were a promise yet to be fulfilled, an invitation to a tradition that marked the arrival of spring. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories made to help you relax. And sometimes that's all we really need. I looked at the basket and knew it was time. The decision formed effortlessly, like water finding its path. Today was the day to give color to those eggs, to transform the kitchen into a family workshop. The idea brought a gentle warmth to my chest, a memory of other mornings like this one in years past. The promise wasn't just of colored eggs, but of time spent together, of small hands and large ones working side by side, of quiet conversations and soft laughter. The promise was to fill the silence with the gentle sound of creation. I went to the tall cupboard in the corner of the pantry. On the top shelf, behind jars of jam and bags of flour, was the box. It wasn't a pretty box. It was made of cardboard, its edges worn and softened by time. On one side, a single word was written in black marker, the lettering now a little faded: Easter. I grabbed a small stool to reach it. The box was light, but it seemed to hold the weight of many memories. I placed it on the counter with care. The sound of the cardboard on the stone was the first noise to break the morning silence. I opened the flaps, which gave way without resistance. Inside, everything was organized. There were small packets of powdered dye, the colors printed in vibrant letters: red, blue, yellow, green. There was a handful of white wax crayons, some short and worn from use. There were wire dippers made specifically for lowering and lifting the eggs from the jars of dye, and at the bottom, a roll of old newspaper saved to protect the table. The scent that rose from the box was faint but distinct, a scent of wax, of old paper, and an almost imperceptible hint of vinegar, a ghost of Easter's past. I took a deep breath. It was the smell of a beginning. Every object inside had a purpose, a role in the small ceremony that was about to unfold. The imbalance of the white eggs and the silent kitchen would be corrected step by step. The transformation would begin now with the simple task of preparing the space. The promise of color and calm activity was about to be kept. The first step was always to protect the table. I took the roll of newspaper from the box and unfurled it across the wooden surface. The gray, letter-filled sheets spread out, covering the wood grain with news from weeks past. The sound of the paper unfolding was crisp and pleasant, a sound of preparation. I smoothed the creases with my hands, creating a safe workspace where splatters and stains would be welcome, part of the process. Next, I went to find the containers for the colors. I opened a kitchen cabinet and chose several clear glass jars, the kind that used to hold jam or olives. I washed each one with warm water and dried them with a soft cloth until the glass gleamed. The soft clinking of the jars touching each other as I arranged them on the newspaper was a delicate sound of promise. I set out 6 jars in a row, one for each of the main colors we would create. Beside the jars, I placed a tablespoon and a small measuring cup. The vinegar would be needed to brighten the colors, and a little bit of precision helped ensure they came out strong and even. I went to the pantry and returned with the bottle of white vinegar. The window light passed through the clear liquid, making it shine. I set it beside the other materials.
Now the tools. I went back to the cardboard box and took out the wire dippers. They were simple tools, nothing more than a wire loop attached to a long handle, but they were perfect for their job. They allowed you to gently lower the eggs into the dye and lift them out without cracking the shell. I placed one beside each glass jar. Then I took out the white wax crayons. They were short, some with worn-down tips. I put them on a small saucer in the middle of the table, within everyone's reach. The final step in preparing the space was to create the drying station. I took the metal rack used for cooling cakes and placed it on an extra layer of newspaper, a little away from the dyeing area. This was where the painted eggs would rest, the excess color dripping onto the paper below as they air-dried. When I was done, I took a step back to look at the table. It was transformed. It no longer was just a kitchen table, but a workstation, an invitation to creativity. The newspaper, the glass jars, the dippers, the wax crayons, the drying rack, every element was in its place, waiting. The basket of white eggs was still in the center, but now it no longer seemed lonely. It was surrounded by possibility, part of a plan that was beginning to take shape. The silence of the house was no longer one of waiting, but of anticipation. The stage was set. With the table ready, the focus turned to the stars of the day, the eggs. They needed to be cooked. I picked up the wicker basket with both hands. The eggs shifted slightly, making a low, hollow sound. I carried them to the sink and one by one picked up each egg. I felt the cool, smooth shell in my fingers. I examined each one quickly, making sure there were no cracks. They were all perfect. I took the widest pot from the cupboard. I placed a folded dish towel in the bottom, an old trick to keep the eggs from knocking together and cracking as they cooked. Carefully, I began to arrange the eggs in a pot in a single layer. The sound of each egg being placed on the cloth was soft, an almost inaudible thud. They nestled against one another, a collection of white oval shapes. I carried the pot to the sink and turned on the cold water. The water ran, filling the pot slowly. The sound of the water covering the eggs was calming. I watched the level rise until they were completely submerged, with about an inch of water above them. The water magnified their shape, making them seem a little larger, more precious. I placed the pot on the largest burner of the stove. I turned the knob, and the blue flame appeared with a soft click, licking the bottom of the pot. Now it was a matter of patience. I stood there for a moment, watching. Tiny bubbles began to form at the bottom of the pot and rise, clinging to the eggshells. The once still water began to stir slightly. As the water heated, steam began to rise, fogging the kitchen window. A clean, humid warmth started to fill the air. Soon, the water reached a gentle boil. I reduced the heat so the bubbles were gentle, not violent. I set a timer, 12 minutes. That was the time needed for them to be perfectly hard-boiled, with a firm yellow yolk. During those minutes, the only sound in the kitchen was the steady bubbling of the water and the ticking of the clock on the wall. It was a time of pause, a transition. The eggs were changing their state, from fragile and liquid inside to solid and sturdy. When the time was up, I turned off the heat. The bubbling slowed to a stop. Very carefully, I carried the pot to the sink and poured out the hot water. Steam rose in a thick, warm cloud. Then I turned on the cold water again, filling the pot to cool the eggs quickly. I let them sit in the cold water for a few minutes,
changing it once to make sure they cooled completely.
Finally, I lifted the eggs from the water, one by one. They were warm to the touch, but not hot. I dried each one with a clean dish towel and placed them back in the wicker basket. Now they were not just raw eggs, they were ready. They were solid, prepared for the next step. The weight of the basket felt slightly different, more substantial. The canvas was ready to receive its color. The time had come to create the colors. I took the small paper packets from the box. Each one was a promise of a different hue. I opened the first, the blue packet. I tore the edge carefully and tipped it over one of the glass jars. A fine powder, a deep and dark blue, fell to the bottom of the jar. Next, I opened the yellow, which was light and bright as sunlight. Then the red, intense and vibrant. The green, the color of new leaves. I repeated the process for each of the 6 jars, creating small piles of colored powder at the bottom of each. The contrast of the vibrant powder against the clear glass was beautiful on its own. It was like having a painter's pure pigments waiting to be brought to life. The recipe was simple, the same one every year. I went to the stove and heated some water, not letting it boil. The hot water would help the powder dissolve quickly. With the measuring cup, I poured the same amount of warm water into each jar. As soon as the water touched the powder, the magic happened. The color spread instantly, blooming in the water in clouds and swirls. The dark blue transformed into a sky blue, the red into a ruby tone, the yellow into liquid gold. I stirred the contents of each jar. The sound of the metal tapping gently against the glass was the only noise. I watched the powder dissolve completely until the water became a clear, uniform, colored liquid. The final ingredient was the vinegar. It helped the color set on the eggshell. I opened the bottle and a sharp, acidic smell filled the kitchen. It wasn't a sweet scent, but it was tied to this tradition, and so it was comforting. I added a tablespoon of vinegar to each jar. The surface of the liquid rippled for a moment as the vinegar met the colored water. I stirred one last time. Now the jars in a row on the table looked like liquid jewels. The morning light shone through them, projecting colorful patches onto the newspaper. There was a deep blue like the night sky, a vibrant green like spring grass, a cheerful yellow, a warm orange like the sunset, a vivid red, and a soft violet. It was possible to create other colors by mixing them, but starting with the primaries was part of the ritual. Other family members began to arrive in the kitchen, drawn by the movement and the colors. A grandmother with a calm smile, a child with wide, wondering eyes. No one needed instructions. They simply sat at the table, watching the jars of color with quiet expectation. The colors were ready. The once monochromatic kitchen now had points of light and vibrancy. The next step would be to use the invisible to create the visible. Before the plunge into color came the moment of secrets. We picked up the white wax crayons from the saucer. They were the tools for the invisible drawings. Each of us took a cool, hard-boiled egg from the basket. The egg fit perfectly in the palm of a hand, its smooth, porous surface a small blank canvas. The process was quiet and focused. The grandmother, with steady, experienced hands, began to draw a delicate floral pattern on her egg. Her movements were slow and precise. The white wax glided over the shell, leaving an almost imperceptible mark, an oily sheen that could only be seen by tilting the egg toward the light. Where the wax touched, the dye would not take. That was the secret. The child, sitting beside her, gripped the wax crayon more tightly. Their drawings were simpler and bolder, straight lines that crossed, small circles, perhaps the initial of their name. The sound of their crayon was a bit rougher, a concentrated scratching. The complexity of the drawing didn't matter. What mattered was the act of creating something personal on each egg. I chose to make a pattern of stripes and dots. I turned the egg slowly in my hand, drawing a line of wax around its entire circumference, then another and another. Between the stripes, I added small dots. The work required a light touch. Too much pressure, and the wax would clump. Too little, and the line wouldn't be solid. It was an exercise in balance and attention. No one spoke much. The only sound was the soft gliding of wax on eggshell. It was meditative work. The outside world seemed to fade away, and the focus narrowed to the small white sphere in hand. We would glance at each other now and then, a knowing smile, a look of admiration for the pattern someone else was creating. The beauty of this step was in its invisibility. We were creating patterns we couldn't clearly see. It was an act of faith, of trusting that the lines we drew would appear later, revealed by the color. We covered the eggs with stars, spirals, names, simple messages. Each egg became unique before it even received its first layer of color. When an egg was finished, it was placed carefully back in an empty part of the basket, waiting for its color bath. Slowly, the basket began to fill with prepared eggs. They still looked white and simple at first glance, but now they held secrets. They were like letters written in invisible ink, waiting for the developer. The table was filled with a calm, focused activity. Hands moved with purpose. Time passed without notice. The sunlight shifted its position in the kitchen, but we barely perceived it, immersed in our little world of wax and eggshells. When the last egg was drawn, we took a short pause. We looked at our collective work, a basket full of invisible promises, ready for the most anticipated moment of all. The moment of revelation had arrived. With the eggs drawn and the colors ready, the final stage of creation could begin. I picked up the first wire dipper and chose an egg from the basket. I placed it carefully in the dipper's loop. It balanced there, white and holding its secret drawings. I decided the first would be yellow. Slowly, I lowered the dipper, submerging the egg in the jar of bright yellow dye. The egg disappeared into the liquid, and the liquid shifted gently to receive it. A small plop was the only sound. A few air bubbles rose to the surface and burst. Now we had to wait. The color needed time to seep into the porous shell. I left the egg submerged for about a minute. The anticipation in the air was palpable. The child leaned forward, eyes fixed on the yellow jar, trying to see through the glass. With a slow, steady motion, I lifted the dipper. The egg emerged from the dye, transformed. It was a vibrant, cheerful yellow, and like magic, where the wax had been applied, the shell remained white. The stripes and dots I had drawn now stood out in white against the yellow background. The dye ran down the egg, glistening in the light. A sigh of admiration went around the table. The first success. Very carefully, I carried the dripping egg to the drying rack and set it down. It stood out, a small, colorful jewel. Inspired, the others began. The grandmother dipped her egg with the floral pattern into the blue dye. The child, with a wide smile, chose red for theirs. Soon, all the wire dippers were in use. Eggs rose and fell from the jars of color, each one emerging as a unique surprise.
The grandmother's blue egg revealed delicate white flowers. The child's red egg showed their initials and circles in a bold, happy contrast. We started to experiment. We dipped an already dry yellow egg into the blue dye for just a second, and it came out with a greenish tint, with the yellow and white patterns shining through from underneath. The kitchen filled with a rhythmic activity, the dipping, the waiting, the revealing, the transferring to the drying rack. The rack, once empty and metallic, began to fill with color. There were single-colored eggs with white designs. There were two-toned eggs with complex patterns created by layering. Each one was a small experiment,
a miniature artwork. There was no rush. We savored each small transformation. The process was as important as the result. Conversation flowed, low and easy. We commented on the colors, admired each other's patterns. It was a dance of hands and colors, a shared ritual that turned simple objects into something special. Little by little, the basket of white eggs emptied, and the drying rack filled. The collection of colored eggs grew, a miniature rainbow on the newspaper. The smell of vinegar was still in the air, but now it was mixed with a sense of accomplishment and quiet joy. The work was nearly complete. The transformation was visible, vibrant, and beautiful. The last eggs were placed on the rack to dry. The colors were vibrant and glossy while wet, and we watched them in silence for a moment. The window light hit them, creating small points of brilliance. The kitchen, which had been a place of intense, focused activity, now settled into a state of calm. It was time to clean up. The ritual of cleaning was as much a part of the tradition as the painting itself. I began to gather the jars of dye. I poured the colored liquid down the sink, and the colors swirled together for an instant before disappearing down the drain. I washed each glass jar, removing the traces of dye until they were clear again. The sound of running water was the only loud sound in the kitchen. While I washed, the others helped. The grandmother dried the jars and put them away. The child, with a damp cloth, carefully wiped any splash of color that had escaped the newspaper and hit the counter. The newspaper, now stained with a map of colors and drips, was carefully folded and put in the recycling. The wooden table reappeared, clean and untouched. The wax crayons and wire dippers were cleaned and placed back in their cardboard box, ready for next year. When the kitchen was clean and organized again, the eggs on the rack were dry to the touch. The color had become a little softer, more matte, giving them a velvety, natural appearance. I went to get the wicker basket that had once held the white eggs. Now it would serve as the home for the transformed ones. I lined the bottom of the basket with a bit of dry straw we kept for this purpose. The straw had a sweet, rustic scent. It would create a soft nest to protect the eggs. Then we began the last and most pleasant job, arranging the eggs in the basket. We picked up each egg carefully, one by one, admiring it for an instant before placing it on the straw. The blue egg with white flowers was placed next to an orange egg with spirals. A light green egg was nestled beside a violet one with dots. There was no rigid system. We just arranged the colors in a way that felt balanced and beautiful. The basket filled slowly. The colors and patterns complemented one another. The striped egg, the egg with stars, the egg with a sun drawn by a child's hand. Together, they told the story of our morning. They were more than just colored eggs. They were the result of shared time, of patience, and of joint creativity. When the last egg was placed, the basket was full of vibrant. We set it in the center of the clean table. There, in the soft afternoon light that was beginning to filter through the window, it was the focus of the entire kitchen. It was an object of simple beauty made with our own hands. The three of us stood there around the table, just looking at the basket. Nothing needed to be said. The feeling of satisfaction was shared, a quiet warmth that filled the space. The work was done. The morning's promise had been beautifully fulfilled. The afternoon drifted by slowly. The sunlight, now more golden, cut across the kitchen in long angles, touching the basket on the table. The colors of the eggs seemed warmer, deeper in this light. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence than the mornings. It was a full, contented silence. The grandmother sat in her armchair in the living room, reading a book.
The child played on the rug with their toys, lost in their own world, and I stayed in the kitchen for a little longer, sipping a cup of tea, simply enjoying the scene. The basket was the center of it all, a point of color and life in the afternoon stillness. Each egg was a small reminder of the process, of choosing the colors, of the invisible drawings, of the surprise of the reveal. It was a testament to time well spent, to a slow, deliberate rhythm in a world that often moves too fast. The smell of vinegar had faded completely, replaced by the gentle aroma of tea and the clean scent of the tidy kitchen. Only the sight of the basket told the story of what had happened here. I looked out the window. The day outside continued, clouds moving lazily across the sky. Life went on, but inside we had created a small moment of pause, a moment of beauty that would stay with us. Tomorrow, the eggs would be hidden in the garden. They would be found with joy. They would be part of another celebration. But for now, their purpose was simply to be, to just rest in the basket, beautiful and complete. I finished my tea. The warmth of the cup in my hands was comforting. The sunlight began to fade, and the shadows in the kitchen grew long. The basket of eggs remained, a beacon of soft color in the growing twilight. The day was ending. The tradition had been honored once more, and the peace that remained was as tangible as the painted eggs in the basket.